Hello friends, let us discuss an interesting essay today. The essay titled Sir Roger at Church, written by Joseph Addison. Now, Joseph Addison and Richard Steele are two names that we always remember together. They were a wonderful combination of writers. They were a wonderfully talented duo who have made great contribution to English literature. Now, they were contemporaries. They were born, interestingly, in the same year, 1672. Together, they are remembered as the precursors of periodical essays. They are two people of contrasting characters who collaborated to make great and unforgettable contributions to English literature. And they are remembered as the champions of the periodical essay. This was the early 18th century, and it was Steele who founded the Tatler. That was the first of the long line of 18th century periodicals. The Tatler, it was immensely popular, and then came the Spectator on March 1st, 1711, and it continued up to December 6th, 1712, and later on in 1714, Addison once again revived this, because it must have been difficult for them to sustain it, because they have to continuously write. A periodical essay is a short essay that deals with a topic of current interest, and it was sometimes some of them were a kind of a series where every week or maybe in a week 2 or 3 days the periodical would be published. And so it would have been a difficult task to sustain it for long. So that is why you can see that there are breaks in between and then it goes on. And altogether, in the Tatler and the Spectator, these two men, they managed to write quite a number of essays. There were 635 essays in all. Addison wrote 274 and Steele wrote 240. And the remaining 121 essays were written by other contributors, their friends and other writers. And what was the aim of them beginning the Tatler and the Spectator? Initially, they set out as moralists to break down two opposed influences. This was the Restoration. It was the period that had followed the Restoration, and culture on the whole was degenerate. There was so much of licentiousness and vulgarity in literature. In drama, it had become kind of gross, and so Steele and Addison felt that they should do something about it. They wanted to restore and refine literature and culture and the general thought of those days. And so they wanted to break down two opposed influences. One, they wanted to bring people out of the Restoration tradition of loose living and loose thinking. There was so much of lawlessness around, and they wanted to restore some kind of order. And another thing they were against is they were against Puritan fanaticism and bigotry. On one side, there was this extremely wayward, loose kind of living that the Restoration promoted. On the other side, you had extremely narrow-minded Puritan fanaticism and bigotry. So through their writings, they were trying to bring about a change in society, in a way, in the manner in which people looked at life. And for this, they did not use invectives or harsh language. They did not condemn anybody or satirize anybody. Instead, they wrote solid, good-humored prose. They accepted the common failings of mankind, but they consistently emphasized the claims of decency and sound sense. When they wrote at that time, almost all these periodical publications focused on politics, political controversies, and news items. As opposed to that, the Tatler and then the Spectator, they started writing about interesting topics like theatre reviews, essays on clothing and manners, on literature, on sports, on poetry, on drama. And so that was a refreshing change. And they took a very entertaining look into the attitudes, tastes and styles of the early 18th century England. They were catering to the middle class who were left untended, because what the biggest contribution of the Tatler and the Spectator and such periodical publications was that they created a domain of society that was separate from the state of the royal courts, where the middle class people came together to discuss and debate social issues. So they created a space for middle class people to come together and discuss and debate social issues. Where all the publications were full of political writing and news items and war, the ordinary people found nothing that would interest them. They found nothing pertaining to their life, their daily routine. And that is when these people came up with their innovative periodical essays, which dealt with ordinary people, with real people living in real situations, talking about topics that ordinary people were genuinely interested in, telling them how to behave, what to wear, how to improve their health, what to read, how to watch a play. And all this made these publications immensely popular. They wrote with an educational and a moral aim too, and they forced their contemporaries to dwell on right social and domestic conduct. They popularized general culture. They tried to enhance taste and aesthetic sense of the public by discussing philosophy, by discussing art, drama and poetry. For instance, Addison wrote 18 essays on Milton's Paradise Lost, and it is believed that these essays were instrumental in a renewed interest in Milton. So more people started seeking the poems of Milton, and they started reading Milton. So at a time when most of the print publication was bitterly political, the Tatler and the Spectator chose to remain non-partisan. They did not take any sides. They spoke for the ordinary people, about ordinary people, in a language that they could understand it, in a language that was suffused with humor and goodwill. And Addison's essays are, the style is considered to be perfect. His essays are still considered to be perfect models for English writing. And in recent times, these essays have even been compared to blogs, to blogging. Because you know what a blogger does. He writes short pieces on interesting and on topics of contemporary relevance. That is exactly what Addison and Steel did those days, and that is why this comparison. Another trend that they brought in, which I should mention before we go to the essay, a trend of character writing. Now this essay that we have here is an example of that, character writing. They brought out wholesome sketches, character sketches of real men in real situations. This method of writing about characters, about describing people, that was there much earlier. In Greek literature, you had the writer called Theophrastus who tried this character writing. And later on, you had 16th century again, you had writers like Sir Thomas Overbury, Joseph Hall, John Earle, who made attempts in this direction. But the genre achieved perfection when it reached the hands of Addison and Steel. They wrote about some characters, and Sir Roger de Coverley is one important character that they created. Now this particular character, Sir Roger de Coverley, is a fictional character, and this character was devised by Joseph Addison, and Joseph Addison presented this man, Sir Roger, as one of the members of the Spectator Club. There are other fictional characters too. Along with Sir Roger, you have Sir Andrew Freeport, you have a Captain Sentry, you have Will Honeycomb, and a couple of others also who have not exactly been named. So all of them together form the Spectator Club. And these people are also supposed to be authors of papers and letters that were published in Addison and Steel's the Spectator. Okay, so they were fictional characters who were believed to be the writers of these pieces, in occasional contributors of articles in these two papers, that is in the Tatler and the Spectator. And this Roger de Coverley, there is this Richard Steele's essay on Spectator Club where he introduces this man to us, and he gives us a very detailed description about who this Sir Roger is. And he is supposed to be a baronet of Worcestershire, and he is a representative of a typical landed country gentleman. He was an owner of a lot of land, quite wealthy, but a very good-hearted person. He was also, as I told you, a member of the fictitious Spectator Club, and his great-grandfather, that is this Roger de Coverley's great-grandfather, was supposed to be an inventor of a very famous country dance, which is called after him. So there is a country dance. If you look for it in the Wikipedia, or if you search for it, you will find that Roger de Coverley is also the name of a dance. And Addison tells us that the dance gets its name from the great-grandfather of our Sir Roger. And this man is a peculiar kind of a person. He is singular in his behavior. That is what Steele tells about him. He is a gentleman that is very singular in his behavior, but his singularities proceeded from his good sense. Okay, he was a very good man. So though he was peculiar, people loved him, and he remained a bachelor throughout because he was crossed in love by a perverse, beautiful widow of the next county to him. So he was in love with somebody, but then his love was thwarted, and so he decided to go unmarried. And it is also said that he stopped taking care of himself, stopped dressing well after this incident. And he figures in many essays in both the Spectator and Tatler. Both Addison and Steele have written essays with Sir Roger as the central character. And Addison, in one of his essays, in the essay number, in the periodical numbered 517, he has also reported the death of Sir Roger de Coverley. So Roger de Coverley was so popular, he almost became a real character. People kind of felt that he was someone who lived amongst them. And he is, as I mentioned earlier, a good old soul, and he exemplifies the values of an old country gentleman. And though he is ridiculous, he is immensely lovable. And he is also a Tory. You must have heard of the Whigs and the Tories in the English Parliament. And so he is presented as a Tory, and his Tory politics is harmless but silly. Okay, so altogether a very lovable character. So that is about Sir Roger. Now the essay that we are going to discuss today, or at least just read today, the language is simple enough, is titled Sir Roger at Church. Now these periodical essays are generally not very long. Now this one here is just 3 paragraphs. So let me begin to read the first paragraph. The title of the essay, Sir Roger at Church. So the narrator says, I am always very well pleased with a country Sunday, and think, if keeping holy the 7th day were only a human institution, it would be the best method that could have been thought of for the polishing and civilizing of mankind. It is certain the country people would soon degenerate into a kind of savages and barbarians, were there not such frequent returns of a stated time, in which the whole village meet together with their best faces and in their best, cleanliest habits, to converse with one another upon indifferent subjects, hear their duties explained to them, and join together in adoration of the Supreme Being. Sunday clears away the rust of the whole week, not only as it refreshes in their minds the notions of religion, but as it puts both the sexes upon appearing in their most agreeable forms, and exerting all such qualities as are apt to give them a figure in the eye of the village. A country fellow distinguishes himself as much in the churchyard as a citizen does upon the change, the whole parish politics being generally discussed in that place either after sermon or before the bell rings. Okay, so that first few lines, he talks about a Sunday at church. and he expresses his views. Addison expresses his views on these Sunday gatherings in the church. He says, I am always very happy with the country Sunday, because usually now according to Christianity, why do the Christians go to church every Sunday? Because it is believed that God, after the process of creation that lasted for 6 days, he decided to take rest on the 7th day, and that was called the Sabbath day. And so the practice is that after hard work for 6 days, on the 7th day, people are expected, Christians, I think Jews also follow this practice, they take rest on Sunday. Rest in the sense they keep away all the other work, and they are expected to spend this one day remembering God and thanking God. It's not a kind of a holiday. Sabbath day is a day when you spend time praising the Lord and thanking Him for all that He has given us. So every Sunday, as we know, the Christians go to the church and they offer prayers. So he says, I am very happy with the country Sunday, and he says, and think, if keeping holy the 7th day were only a human institution, it would be the best method that could have been thought for polishing and civilizing of mankind. So he says, whoever thought of this idea of keeping the 7th day of the week as a holy day, okay, that was a very good idea, he believes, because that one day it preserves mankind. It serves to polish and civilize mankind, because he feels that if the Sunday gatherings were not there, the countrymen would have deteriorated into savages and barbarians. Because every Sunday you are constantly reminded about God, about the things that you do, and there is a meeting where you have to put on your best face, where you have to dress up well. On Sundays people wear their best clothes, your Sunday best. And so this frequent gathering on a very regular basis keeps people from, or protects them from disintegrating or from falling into unhealthy kind of lifestyles. At least for the sake of going to the church on Sunday, they have to sober up and be there. That itself amounts to a lot of refinement. So that's why he says that country people would surely degenerate into a kind of savages and barbarians if they were not required to frequent, or if they were not required to frequent the church at a stated time every seventh day you have to. So in between you don't have the time to get thoroughly spoiled. On the 7th day you have to gather yourself up, in which the whole village, they meet together with their best faces, they wear their cleanest clothes, they talk to each other about indifferent subjects. In the church, the priest tells them about the duties that they have to do, and they all join together in adoring the Supreme Being. This is what happens every Sunday. And so what happens, he says, Sunday clears away the rust of the whole week. So all that rust, if at all any rust has already gathered on your mind, you have forgotten God for some time, on Sunday all that rust is clean and you once again shiny and polished. And it refreshes their mind, not only in the notions of religion, but then since all the people come together, both the sexes, they all come there in the most agreeable forms, there is a kind of all round entertainment is there. And exerting all such qualities are apt to give them a figure in the eye of the village. So that every man and woman who goes to the church knows that they have to put up their best appearance, because they are going to be judged by the people. Everybody is going to take a look at them and talk about them. They are going to meet people. So that gives them a sense of, a purpose, gives them a sense of purpose. So they look forward to Sundays. And he says that a country fellow distinguishes himself as much in the churchyard as a citizen does upon the change. The whole parish politics being generally discussed, in that place either after sermon. So a country fellow looks forward to, or he likes being, because for him the churchyard is a very interesting place, like the Change is a place for, I think, for a city dweller. The Change is some place. I could not really find out what exactly the Change meant. The Change, I assume, is some place where the city people gather to discuss. So here the country equivalent is the churchyard. So here people discuss interesting matters either after the sermon or before the bell rings for the sermon. It's a place where they all meet each other. Okay, so as I said, the first few lines are a general discussion about the Sunday and the church. Now we go on to Sir Roger. He says, "My friend Sir Roger, being a good churchman, has beautified the inside of his church with several texts of his own choosing. He has likewise given a handsome pulpit cloth and railed in the communion table at his own expense. He has often told me that at his coming to his estate he found his parishioners very irregular, and that in order to make them kneel and join the responses, he gave every one of them a hassock and a common prayer book, and at the same time employed an itinerant singing master who goes about the country for that purpose, to instruct them rightly in the tunes of the psalms, upon which they now very much value themselves, and indeed outdo most of the country churches that I have ever heard." Now he tells us that Sir Roger is an avid churchgoer, a very devout Christian, and he wants others to be like that too. And so now he is the landlord of that entire place, and he has done everything possible to make sure that the people of his place, of his village, of that parish, they come to the church frequently. And he has beautified his church. Inside the church, maybe he has got somebody to inscribe writing. Several texts from the Bible are displayed in the church, and he has also given a handsome pulpit. You know, the pulpit is the place where it is on the altar. You have the table and the place where the priest stands and talks, addresses the parish. So he has, at his own expense, he has contributed a very beautiful pulpit cloth, and he has the communion table. He has put up railings there, and when he came there in the beginning, maybe he was somewhere else, maybe in London or somewhere in the beginning, and then later on he settled down in this place. And when he came there, he found that people were not very regular in coming to church, and so in order to make them kneel down and join in the responses like in the church, if you have been to a church, you know how it is when the priest says something and the people are the congregation is supposed to repeat it, and there are some songs which the hymns that you're supposed to sing at regular intervals, and everybody is expected to join. It's not just the priest or the choir alone that has to sing, everybody joins in. And so when he went there in the beginning, he found that the people were very irregular. They wouldn't join in, not many of them would kneel and all that. And so in order to encourage them to do all these things, what did he do? He gave them a hassock. A hassock is a small pillow that you can put and you can kneel on it. You find it in the churches, and so he distributed hassocks to each one of them, and also he gave them a common prayer book, each one, so that they can look into the prayer book and sing the songs. And at the same time, he also employed a singing master, an itinerant singing master, a traveling singing master who would go travel around the country and teach these people the correct tunes of all the psalms. And so now it is said that his congregation takes great pride because they are all good singers now because of this extra effort. The common prayer book plus the training that he has given them in singing the songs in the right tune. And he also says that they outdo most of the country churches I have ever heard. And so if you conduct a competition of a singing competition for all the nearby churches, you would find that the people in this church would be the best singers, and all that to a great part is who is responsible for that? It is Sir Roger. As Sir Roger is landlord to the whole congregation, He keeps them in very good order and will suffer nobody to sleep in it besides himself. For if by chance he has been surprised into a short nap at sermon, upon recovering out of it he stands up and looks about him, and if he sees anybody else nodding, either wakes them himself or sends his servant to him. So Sir Roger, as we said earlier, is a very peculiar kind of a character, and he is the landlord, and he is very careful. He maintains order in the church, and he doesn't allow anybody else to sleep in the church, but he can. Okay, because he is the landowner, and sometimes nobody else can sleep beside himself. And at other times, whenever he is awake, he keeps a constant vigil to see whether anybody else is sleeping. And now when he, if at all he dozes off, immediately as he wakes up, he looks around to see whether anybody has fallen asleep. And what does he do? If he finds somebody sleeping, either he goes there and he himself wakes them up, or he sends a servant to wake the sleeping man up. Several other of the old knight's particularities break out upon these occasions. So it is in the church that you can see many peculiar habits of this man displayed. Sometimes he will be lengthening out a verse in the singing psalms, half a minute after the rest of the congregation have done with it. Sometimes when they are all singing a psalm, he will decide to extend the song half a minute. All the others would have stopped, but then he will take an extra half minute. He will lengthen the song for a half a minute. That is one thing that he sometimes does. Sometimes when he is pleased with the matter of his devotion, he pronounces Amen 3 or 4 times to the same prayer. Now, after each prayer, Amen is said. Sometimes when he is in a very good mood, he, instead of one Amen, he keeps saying Amen 2 or 3 or even 4 times for the same prayer. One Amen for one prayer is what is expected, but he sometimes says 3 or 4 Amens. Only he is supposed to do that, mind you, nobody else. And sometimes stands up when everybody else is upon their knees to count the congregation and see if any of his tenants are missing. So when everybody is kneeling, now you know in the church that sometimes during this process of the service, the sermon going on, the mass, when the mass is going on, sometimes all the people kneel down, sometimes they stand up, sometimes they sit down. So when everybody is kneeling down, he'll stand up because he wants to see whether all of them are present, whether somebody is missing. He wants to count. He takes a count to see whether all have attended the church. I was yesterday very much surprised to hear my old friend in the midst of the service calling out to one John Matthews to mind what he was about and not disturb the congregation. Okay, so and it seems the other day what this man did was in the middle of the mass, he called the name of one John Matthews and he told John Matthews to keep quiet. Remember that you are in the church. Don't disturb others. He said this in the middle of the mass. So the irony is that you can imagine who is creating the disturbance now. This John Matthews did something, but nobody else saw that. But now when Sir Roger makes his announcement, everybody is disturbed. That's the irony of the whole thing. This John Matthews, it seems, is remarkable for being an idle fellow, and at that time was kicking his heels for his diversion. So he was kicking his heels. He had kept his legs together, maybe in order not to fall asleep, because in church or in places where you have to listen to somebody speaking for a long time, even maybe when you're listening to my video, there is a tendency for you to fall asleep, and people do many things not to fall asleep. You know, you sometimes scratch your palms to wake yourself up. Sometimes you tickle your upper jaw. These are techniques that I learned when I was a student doing my PG. A friend told me, if you're feeling sleepy, just tickle your upper jaw and immediately your eyes will open and your sleep is gone. So each one has some techniques. You just rub your eyes or something like that. And so as a result, so this John Matthews must have been doing something like that for his diversion. He was bored with the sermon or he was feeling asleep, so he was kicking his heels. That is what he was doing. This authority of the night, though exerted, so I mean what this John Matthews doing was something as harmless as kicking his own heels, but even that Sir Roger couldn't tolerate. This authority of the night, though exerted in that odd manner which accompanies him in all circumstances of life, has a very good effect upon the parish, who are not polite enough to see anything ridiculous in his behaviour. Besides, the good sense, general good sense and worthiness of his character make his friends observe these little singularities as foils that rather set off than blemish his good qualities. So he says that this man is quite authoritative. He makes sure that everybody does things according to what he likes, how it is to be done. Okay, and he exerts himself too. In all circumstances, not only at church, everywhere this is how he behaves. But then he has a very good effect upon the parish, and the people of his parish are, they are good enough to understand that he is doing this all for the good. And so they are very polite, and though he does something very ridiculous, they don't behave as though he is doing something ridiculous. And they understand that his good sense, he is a very worthy character, he is a good person. And so his little singularities here means peculiarities, they only set off his good qualities, they don't blemish, they take it all in good sense. So they like him, they accept him as he is. As soon as the sermon is finished, nobody presumes to stir till Sir Roger is gone out of the church. The knight walks down from his seat in the chancel. So when the mass is over, people just don't get up and walk off from this church. They don't move till Sir Roger gets up. He is the one who gets up. He's got a seat in the front, in the chancel. Chancel is the part where in the front of the church near the altar, where you have the priest and the choir. So he's got a seat somewhere there. So he gets up from there and he starts walking out. Only then do the others follow. The knight walks down from his seat in the chancel between a double row of his tenants that stand bowing to him on each side, and every now and then he inquires how such and one's wife or mother or son or father do, whom he does not see at church, which is understood as a secret reprimand to the person that is absent. So as he's walking down the aisle, and on both sides you have people, and so he nods at them, he smiles at them, and if he finds that somebody is missing, he'll ask them. Suppose a man's wife is missing, a man's mother is missing, somebody's son is missing, he will ask, why is it that this person is not there? Is he okay? And so that is supposed to be a secret reprimand, a kind of a secret chastising, a scolding for him not being here, and it is his way of signaling that I have noticed this person's absence. The chaplain, that is the priest there, has often told me that upon a catechizing day, when Sir Roger has been pleased with the boy that answers well, he has ordered a Bible to be given him next day for his encouragement. So in the catechism class, when the Bible is the class where the Bible is taught to the little children, you know that in all churches on Sundays the children have to attend Bible classes. So he often goes, sometimes it sits there too maybe, and when he sees a child answering everything very well, to encourage him, he gives him a Bible as a gift, and sometimes accompanies it with a flitch of bacon to his mother, and sometimes along with the Bible he also adds a piece of bacon, good bacon or meat. First, maybe he knows that many of his parish, the people in the parish are poor, and so along with an encouragement for the child, he also sends something for the family. Sir Roger has likewise added £5 a year to the clerk's place, and that he may encourage the young fellows to make themselves perfect in the church service, has promised upon the death of the present incumbent, who is very old, to bestow it according to merit. So he also adds £5 every year. There is a clerk, or you have in the church, you have a verger, somebody who takes care of, assists the priest and take care of the church and all that. And Sir Roger increases £5 every year to this man's salary, and he has also promised the youngsters there that one of them would be according to merit, one of you would be selected, because the present incumbent is the one who holds the position now. If when this person retires, one of you will be chosen to this post. So that is also a kind of an encouragement which he gives. That is one way in which he tries to keep everything perfect in the church, because all these young people will be vying with each other so that they would be appointed as the next clerk. The fair understanding between Sir Roger and his chaplain and the mutual concurrence in doing good is the more remarkable, because the very next village is famous for the differences and contentions that rise between the parson and the squire, who live in a perpetual state of war. And he says another outstanding thing that has to be mentioned about this particular church is that there is a perfect understanding between Sir Roger and the priest, the chaplain. Both of them want to do good for others. They are mutually concurrent in their goodness, and this is very remarkable, because in the next church, in the next village, there is a state of war, because the priest and the squire, or the counterpart of the Sir Roger, just like the Sir Roger is the landlord here, there too there must be somebody. And so that man and the priest there, they are constantly at loggerheads. So they live in a perpetual state of war. The parson is always at the squire, and the squire, to be revenged on the parson, never comes to church. So whenever the parson gets a charge, the parson is the priest who is in charge of the parish. Okay, so the parson there, whenever he gets a chance, he is at the squire, means he criticizes the squire, and so to avoid listening to this, the squire does not come to church at all. The squire has made all his tenants atheists and teeth stealers. So to take revenge on the other man, what does the squire do? He has prohibited his tenants from visiting the church, from attending the church and the mass. So he has made all his tenants atheists. And teeth stealer, teeth is the tax, or the portion of your income which is to be given to God or the church. He doesn't permit any of his tenants to attend the church or to give the tithe to the church. That is why he has made all his tenants atheists and tithe stealers, while the parson instructs them every Sunday in the dignity of his order, and insinuates to them almost in every sermon that he is a better man than his patron. So the parson keeps telling the people there that your patron, that is the squire, is an evil man. I am better than him. So there is a open battle going on there. In short, matters are come to such an extremity that the squire has not yet said his prayers either in public or private this half year, and that the parson threatens him, if he does not mend his manners, to pray for him in the face of the whole congregation. So now things have reached a head. Things have reached the worst possible situation, that the squire, or the landlord of that place, he has not prayed either in public or in private for more than 6 months. And the parson says that if you don't mend your manners, and if you don't start praying and don't start attending the church, I will conduct a prayer in public for you, because it is common for the priest to pray for lost souls and for sinners. So the priest threatens the man, saying that I will conduct a prayer for you in the public, and that would be a great humiliation to the squire. So this is what is happening that side. Feuds of this nature, though too frequent in the country, are very fatal to the ordinary people, who are so used to be dazzled with riches that they pay as much deference to the understanding of a man of estate as a man of learning. So Addison makes this observation that such feuds are common, but they have a very damaging effect on the people, on the congregation, because ordinary people, they have great admiration for rich people and for men of learning. So they admire the squire, they take him as a model. Same way they admire the priest too. When these two people have a quarrel, the people of the parish, they are quite bewildered, that they pay as much deference, respect to the understanding of a man of estate. Man of estate is a man of influence, a lord, a man of wealth, as a man of learning, and are very hardly brought to regard any truth, how important soever it may be, that is preached to them, when they know there are several men of 500 a year who do not believe it, And so when there are people, like for example in this case, when this man of the other church, when he refuses to come to the church, but he still earns a lot of money. He's got a lot of money. He earns more than 500 a year. And so if such a man declares that he doesn't believe in God, that he doesn't believe in coming to the church, that will have a very bad effect on the congregation, because then they will start, because they ordinary people have a lot of admiration for rich men, for successful men, for wealthy people. And so if such wealthy people start setting an example by not attending the church, that will definitely have a detrimental effect on the people, especially on their religious attitudes, because they too will decide, if he does not come to church and he still has a lot of money, then that means God continues to bless him even if he doesn't come to church. So then they'll start asking themselves the question, so then why do we go to the church? Because God doesn't seem to give any punishment to that man for not coming to church. So it will make them question their own faith. So that is why he says that feuds of this nature can be damaging to the congregation. Okay, so that is how the essay ends, and you can see that it is quite humorous, and you can see what a lovable picture he presents of Sir Roger, quite ridiculous. At the same time, you don't really feel anything bad towards this man, because you can see the world of goodness that he does. He does everything possible to keep the church a beautiful place. He encourages people to come to the church. He gives them presents and gifts. He does everything possible to motivate them to attend the church. And so his small eccentricities are easily pardonable. So this is the essay, Sir Roger at Church. And you can see, now this is one example of character writing, where you can see that the writer presents a very wholesome and a very realistic picture of this man called Sir Roger. So all the essays of the Tatler, of course I have not read all of them, but at least I have read some 6 or 7, and all of them are of the same style, highly entertaining, very humorous. They make you laugh outright. And they also deal with certain important issues. Here again he talks about how the Sundays help sustain the religious faith of the people. That is something true too. So that is one entertaining essay, and I hope you will find time to read more of them and to enjoy. And we have to be grateful to Richard and Steele for having started this trend of writing short essays, because they are immensely enjoyable to be read, and they also, as I mentioned earlier, Addison was also very perfect in his style, and reading these essays will also improve our language skills. So I hope more of you will try to read a few more essays of Addison and Steel.